call for the Bhagavatam class, next class, Bhagavatam class. Please, I would like request you to Mataji to please announce your, introduce yourself.
Hare Krishna Padma Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharajas, and all glories to the assembled devotees. This is Tiffany in Pennsylvania. And can you please just be a little bit louder? We can hardly hear you, Mataji. Thank you.
Let me increase my volume. My volume is very low. I'm so sorry. Is this better, Mataji? Can you hear me, Mataji, now?
Ah, yes, much better. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Mataji.
Thank you. Hare Krishna, Tiffany Mataji. Dandavat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Please accept my humble obeisances, Mataji. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. This is Niharika from Bloomington.
Hare Krishna, Niharika Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisances, Mataji. Thank you for joining. Hare Krishna.
Padma Mataji, Dandavat Pranam, Srila Prabhupada Srila Gurudev ki jai, Vrinda.
Hare Krishna, Ramagopka Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for joining, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Padma Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisances. All goes to Srila Prabhupada and Gurudev. This is Radharani Devidasi from Baltimore.
Hare Krishna, Radharani Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for joining, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Padma Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. This is Vinita Gandharvika Devidasi from Texas. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Vinita Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All obeisances, Mataji. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for joining, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Padma Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Sri Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj and all the devotees. Hare Krishna. This is Kamudaki Dasi from Baltimore.
Krishna Kamurti Devi Mataji. Dandavat Pranam. Please accept my humble obeisances, Mataji. All glories to Prabhupada. Thank you, Mataji, for joining. Hare Krishna.
Mataji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. This is Revati from Atlanta, Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Revati Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Please accept the humble obeisances, Mataji. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for joining, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Mataji, Revati Devi Dasi from Kentucky.
Hare Krishna, Revati Devi Dasi Mataji. Dandavat Pranam. Please accept the humble obeisances, Mataji. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much for joining, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Padma Mataji, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and all the assembled devotees. This is Indulekha Karuna Devi Dasi from Lincoln. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Indulekha Karuna Mataji. Please accept the humble obeisances, Mataji. Dandavat Pranam. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Mataji. Thank you for joining, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. All glories to Prabhupada, all glories to Guru Maharaj, all glories to assembled devotee. This is Mohini Lakshmi from Detroit.
Hare Krishna, Mohini Lakshmi Mataji, Dandavat Pranam Mataji, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Thank you for joining, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Introduce myself.
We can start recording, Mataji. It's already 6:19.
Not yet, Mataji. Please, can you be a little louder, Mataji? We can't hear you.
Sure, Mataji. Is anybody who would like to introduce yourself? Mataji, am I audible, Mataji?
I can hear you now. I think that Vinita Mataji is starting the recording, so I can read the introduction. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. His Grace Ravindra Chaitanya Prabhuji and his family were introduced to ISKCON in early 1993 through congregation program. As a youth, he took up many services, including dramas, kirtans, book distribution, and preaching under ISKCON Youth Forum Mirror Road during 1997 to 2001. He was recognized as an active youth leader. He completed postgraduate in computer applications MCA from the prestigious VJTI Mumbai in the year 2005. He was ranked 13 in the state for the entrance exam to this course. After completing the course, he served in Pune-based Persistent Systems Limited, Pune's one of the top IT companies with currently more than 20,000 employees and presence in 7 nations. He was a consistent top performer there and was ranked in the top 1% of employees of the company for the year 2006 and 7. During that time, he also pursued postgraduate diploma in business management and MNIMS Mumbai. When he moved on from his job after serving the organization for 4 years, he had already established a very remarkable position in the team as one of the key team leaders for Microsoft projects at Persistent. While working, he got deeply inspired from the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and later he joined the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in 2008 as a full-time member to practice and propagate the sublime teachings of Bhagavad Gita as it is amongst the confused youth of today. He has completed ISKCON's graduate degree, the Bhakti Shastri course, twice, and he topped it. He has vast youth preaching and cultivation experience. He has traveled across India for preaching and visiting many holy places. He did 1 year dedicated study of Srimad Bhagavatam in Bhaktivedanta Vidyapit, Govardhan Eco Village. He was the chief organizer for a mega youth fest called Dristi, hosted by ISKCON Pune in March 2016, commemorating ISKCON's Golden Jubilee celebrations. More than 20,000 youth participated in this highly successful mega fest. He is a respected speaker on lifestyle and consciousness development. He conducts various courses and seminars for youth and congregation members. He can fluently speak English, Hindi, Marathi languages, and is conversant in Bengali, Odia, and Gujarati. Currently, he teaches Bhakti Shastri and runs his own design program, 7 Steps to Success in Bhakti Vriksha at ISKCON Pune, and is a COM member for several departments at ISKCON Pune. He is a national convener for ISKCON India Youth Council, and he plays the harmonium, mridanga, and likes singing and cooking. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the call, Prabhuji. Thank you for sharing your association with us today. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Subject.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Am I audible?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you for this enlightenment on the topic of Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 5th canto, the 7th chapter and the 5th verse. Prabhu. Thank you so much. Please, I'm handing over the counter and the Chaitanya Das Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Is my voice audible?
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhuji.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyantimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manoabhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupah Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guruho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha नमः ओं विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमो महाबलान्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामने गौरत्विषे नमः हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधाकांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. It's my great fortune and honor to be with all of you in this morning program, and I'm very grateful to the organizers for kindly inviting me and giving me an opportunity to discuss from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we are discussing from the 5th canto, chapter number 7, the activities of King Bharata, and we are discussing the 5th verse, 5.7.5. I'll be reciting the verse. It's in prose, so maybe it will be on your screen also. We are there. You can see the words on the screen. Ije cha bhagvantam yagya kraturupam क्रतुभिरुच्च वचै श्रद्धया अर्हताग्निहोत्र दर्श पूर्णमासा चतुर्मास्य पशुसोमानां प्रकृति विकृतिभिर अनुसवनम चातुर्होत्र विधिना। Translation. With great faith, King Bharat performed various kinds of sacrifice. He performed these sacrifices known as Agnihotra, Darsha, Purnamasa, Chaturmasya, Pashu Yagya, wherein a horse is sacrificed, and Som Yagya, wherein a kind of beverage is offered. Sometimes these sacrifices were performed completely and sometimes partially. In any case, in all these sacrifices, the regulations of Chaturhotra were strictly followed. In this way, Bharat Maharaj worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. Animals like horses and cows, purport is by His Divine Grace A.C. Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai. Animals like horses and cows were offered in sacrifice to test the proper execution of the sacrifice. Otherwise, there was no purpose in killing the animal. Actually, the animal was offered in the sacrificial fire to get a rejuvenated life. Generally, an old animal was sacrificed in the fire, and it would come out again in a youthful body. Some of the rituals, however, did not require animal sacrifice. In the present age, animal sacrifices are forbidden, as stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Ashwamedham kavalambam sannyasam palapaitrakam devarena sutotpattim kalau pancha vivarjayet. In this age of Kali, 5 acts are forbidden: the offering of a horse in sacrifice, the offering of a cow in sacrifice, the acceptance of the order of sannyas, the offering of oblations of flesh to the forefathers, and a man's begetting children in his brother's wife. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela 17.164. Such sacrifices are impossible in this age due to the scarcity of expert brahmanas or ritvija who are able to take the responsibility. In the absence of these, the Sankirtan Yajna is recommended. Yagyai Sankirtan Prayer Yajanti hi Sumedha Saha. After all sacrifices are executed, that was from Srimad Bhagavatam 5.7.5. After all sacrifices are executed to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yagyartha Karma. Such activities should be carried out for the Supreme Lord's pleasure. In this age of Kali, the Supreme Lord, in his incarnation of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, should be worshipped with his associates by performance of Sankirtan Yajna, the congregational chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. This process is accepted by intelligent men. Yajyaha Yagyai Sankirtan Prayer Yajanti hi Sumedha Saha. The word Sumedha Saha refers to intelligent men who possess very good brain substance. Hare Krishna. So the subject matter over here is the activities of Bharat Maharaj. And we are reading from the 5th canto, chapter number 7, verse number 5. In this verse, the translation says, with great faith, King Bharat performed various kinds of sacrifice. He performed the sacrifices known as Agnihotra, Darsha, Purnamasa, Chaturmasya, Pashu Yagya, wherein a horse is sacrificed, and Som Yagya, wherein a kind of beverage is offered. Sometimes these sacrifices were performed completely and sometimes partially. In any case, in all these sacrifices, the regulations of Chaturhotra were strictly followed. In this way, Bharat Maharaj worshipped the Supreme Personality of God. So, in this particular verse, we are reading the activities of Bharat Maharaj, as we all have been hearing over the past many days. The character, the sublime character, the pastimes of Bharat Maharaj, and this particular story will lead to a point wherein we will later on reflect upon the mistake of Bharat Maharaj when he gets attached to the deer and eventually leaves his current body, the body of a king, the human body, and gets awarded with a deer. And then later on in the next birth, he becomes, in the third birth rather, he becomes, he gets a birth in the human form and he becomes Jad Bharat. So this episode is a very interesting episode, like every other episode of Srimad Bhagavatam. Why this episode is very, very interesting, very, very relevant for all the practitioners of spiritual life is because the person whose character is being discussed is a very, very transcendental and very highly elevated spiritual person. He is not just an ordinary king. He is also not an ordinary king who is ruling the whole earth, and at a certain point of time, he feels the need to renounce his kingdom and goes to the jungle, goes to the forest, and he spends his whole life in the forest. Bharat Maharaj is a devotee of Krishna, and his whole life is centered with a spiritual goal. As it is mentioned over here in this verse, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that he was doing everything, keeping the Lord in the center of his all activities. So traditionally, in the Vedic method, the four Varnas and four ashrams, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, they were so arranged that the purpose of every Varna and ashram was to drive one to the central point of one's life, of one's purpose of life, and that was basically to go back to the spiritual world. We all understand we have been participating in some or the other spiritual programs. Some have been participating of late recently, and while others have been there for quite many years. So eventually, every one of us understands that the material world is not a befitting place for those who are interested in gaining eternal happiness, because the material world has its own uh, dualities, to the world of duality. So anyone who is seeking permanent shelter must eventually stick to the spiritual path. You see that this is the common theme across different religions, whether it is Islam, whether it is Christianity, or whether it is Buddhism, or any other prominent religion. You see that there is a common understanding, and that understanding is that one cannot be happy in this material world. So we are all on the same page. Of course, the details vary, and the procedure, the method to go to that spiritual world also varies, or how much in-depth knowledge of the spiritual world is given in the textbooks also varies. But principally, all the theists, all the religions, prominent religions, we all subscribe to one idea that the material world is no good place. We should aspire to go to another place which can give us permanent eternal happiness. So that is the good point. We all align on one common principle. And then unbiased study of these different religions brings us to an understanding that there is difference in the depth or in the details of every path. In the Vedic path that we follow, the Sanatana Dharma, there is great amount of detail. There is a lot of history. There is so much of study. There is so much of material available to understand the whole procedure of how one can transmigrate from this material world to the spiritual world, and also details about what the spiritual world is like. Everything is very much available through different textbooks. So the idea of Vedic India was that everyone aspires to go to the spiritual world. At the end of the life, they would like to proceed to the spiritual world, and so kings like Bharat Maharaj were also they had organized their life in such a way that everything is directed towards that one goal. Sometimes after coming in Krishna consciousness and having spent some months or years and having propagated the importance of the holy name and the Sankirtan years, which is a subject which we will talk about a little later, as Srila Prabhupada has mentioned in his purport. But otherwise, sometimes we feel that all yajnas, yajna is the main subject of this particular text, and we see that there are different names of yajnas which are mentioned. There are the Agni Hotras, the Darsha Yajnas, the Paurnamasa, Chaturmasa, etc. So many a times we conclude with our understanding that yajna means karma kand. Karma kand is actually a process in which a person performs Vedic yajnas But the purpose of those yajnas is actually some form of direct or indirect, personal or extended sense gratification. So these yajnas are performed with the goal of getting some material benefits. Many a times, that is the major purpose for which these yajnas are performed. But that is not the only purpose for which these yajnas are performed. Yajna, the word yajna, comes from the Sanskrit root yaj. Yaj means to offer or to sacrifice. So the very word sacrifice indicates a spirit of giving up something which is dear to one. Ideally, that is what would mean sacrifice. So the object which one has to sacrifice must be belonging to the person who is conducting the sacrifice, and it must be something that is dear to him. It must be worthy of a sacrifice, right? In India, there is a very traditional concept of doing the Char Dham Yatra, the 4 holy places. You might have heard about it. So there are 4 prominent dham, spiritual places, which generally the ideology as propagated by Shankaracharya is that every Indian, every person, every Vedic follower must at least once in his lifetime have the darshan or must visit these holy 4 places, these 4 holy places. So that one is in north, one is in south, one is on the east coast, and one is on the west coast of India. That's a complete circle. On the north side, you have Badrikashram, Badrinath, Kedarnath. There are the 4 holy dhams over there itself, Yamunotri, Gangotri included. So that is one. On the eastern coast, you have Jagannath Puri. In the southern tip of India, you have Rameshwaram. And on the west coast, we have Dwarka. So in India, at least a few years or decades before, at least, the generation of that time had a very prominent idea that in one's lifetime, one should complete the darshan of the 4 holy dham. Char Dham Yatra, it is called. And it would be a very arduous task actually to complete the Char Dham Yatra, because we didn't have road transport like we have today. It was a very difficult journey, especially the journey of Badrinath and Kedarnath, which is 3,500 meters above the sea level, something like 3.5 kilometers above the ground level. So that would be too much, and people would have to take all the risk while climbing uphill to reach to Badrinath and have the darshan of Lord Badrinath. So most of the times that would be the 4th one in the order, after having completed the other 3, which are fairly simple in terms of logistics. The 4th one would be a tough one, Badrinath, and it was a kind of well-known understanding in the family that the person goes for this Badrinath Yatra, then it is up to the Lord whether he will return back or not. But with the modern day advancement, technology, facility, development, things have become quite easy. Still, it is a little tough, and most people find it very challenging. So my point was that people would complete this Char Dham Yatra, and when they would complete the Yatra, as a gesture of offering to the Lord something, they would offer something which is very dear to them. Generally, it would be a food item which they would give up for life. They would say, from here on, having completed the Char Dham Yatra, I take a pledge to not eat a particular offering, which would be very dear to them. Like many people would give up sweets. They would say, okay, from here on, no more sweets. Or from here on, no more of this particular vegetable, which would be very dear to them. But eventually, that whole spirit got convoluted, and people started sacrificing things that which they would anyways they were not liking. Those vegetables like brinjals or bitter gourd, karela, bengan. So people started sacrificing in the name of sacrificing. They were giving up those things which they anyways didn't like. So they would be relieved anywhere they would go after the Char Dham Yatra, because there is a ceremony in which they go to many homes having completed the Char Dham Yatra. So they would safely say, sorry, I've given up this thing, I'm taking it no more. That would be a big reliever for them. So the idea is that that is not called as a sacrifice, because it does not involve the spirit of giving up something which is dear to us. It is just about giving up anything. Like many a times in the temple, people come to the people call up our reception desk, our info center. I manage that service in Radha Kunj Vihari Temple, Pune, and sometimes they call us. It so happened recently, about 2 weeks before, a person called up and he said he wants to give up a fridge. He wants to give away a fridge, and he was so much intent on giving up that he was like chasing our team, our information center person, and that devotee was kind of fed up with this follow up, because at least 8 to 10 times he called up and said, I want to give it up. Please come and collect it. Please come and collect it. And so finally he asked me, what should we do? I told him to get photos of the fridge. It seemed to be a very old, worn out fridge. And then when our team went to collect, it was all in shambles. The whole thing was very rusty. But then because we had gone, we had to collect it and we brought it to the temple. So again, now this is also looks to be a kind of sacrifice, and we do appreciate the feeling and the sentiment behind it. But actually, sacrifice is even more than that, wherein a person gives up something which is very dear to him. In doing that sacrifice, one should incur some sort of pain, some sort of, you know, it should be creating some kind of anxiety at least. So the word yaj over here refers to sacrifice, and from yaj comes yagya. Now, when we hear of the word yagya, most often it's a fire sacrifice, the image of a fire sacrifice that comes into our mind. But yagya is not only about fire sacrifice. Yagya essentially means giving up something for the pleasure of some, or in fulfillment of some purpose. And there are many different types of yagyas. A list is being provided here, and we do not find many details about these yagyas in the Srimad Bhagavatam, although these names come sometimes on and often here and there. But some of these yagyas are fire sacrifices, like the Darsh Yagya, Purnamasi Yagya, Chaturmasi Yagya, the Pashu Yagya. These yagyas are fire sacrifices. So fire is the main element. Fire consumes all the ingredients. And fire yagya, in the fire yagya, the Lord acts through the agency of fire to consume the offerings. So most often the one most popular is the fire sacrifice, which we also in ISKCON sometimes observe. Recently we had Narsim Chaturdashi, so a beautiful fire sacrifice was held. And at other times when there is a Diksha initiation ceremony, we have a yagya ceremony. Even during deity installation, deity welcoming, we do observe a grand fire sacrifice. So this is a Vedic method. This is a very much Vedic method, and its applicability is still there, even in Kali Yuga. But there are other kinds of sacrifices or other kinds of yagyas which are not fire sacrifices, like the Som Yagya. The Som Yagya is offering of beverages, okay, to the Supreme Lord. So it is not done with fire of particular a kind of beverage made according to scriptural recipe is offered to the Lord. So that does not involve fire sacrifice. Then there are some sacrifices wherein animals are involved, like Pashu Yagya. Here specifically, the most popular Pashu Yagya. Pashu means an animal. So the most popular Pashu Yagya is the Ashwamedh Yagya. Ashwa word um, refers to horse. Ashwamedh Yagya. There are other other sacrifices also in which other animals also are sacrificed. Horse is one. Gomed yagya means a sacrifice in which a cow is sacrificed or an ox is sacrificed at times. And then there are other sacrifices also. There are many more details available. I'm not so much adept these details of these sacrifices. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam also, Prabhupada generally does not discuss about these subjects so much in detail, except for the fact that in a Ashwamedh Yajna, the sacrifice is held to commemorate um, the it establishes the supremacy. The word would be it's an imperial sacrifice. Imperial, the word. It is basically conducted by the royal order to establish their sovereignty. Hmm? Even this Ashwamedh Yajna, we mainly hear in the Mahabharata. Mahabharata, Lord Yudhishthir Maharaj performed 3 Ashwamedh Yajnas. So we hear of the Ashwamedh Yajna there. But in the Vedic India, or you can say in the past 300, 400 years ago also, these fire sacrifices, the Ashwamedh Yajna was performed. There was a famous king, Raja means king. There was a famous king, King Jai Singh of Jaipur. He lived around 400-500 years ago, and he did fire sacrifices, Ashwamedh Yajna. Also in South India, there was a Chola dynasty, very popular dynasty, and they ruled a lot of South India for quite a long time. So there are inscriptions or records available of kings of the Chola dynasty performing Ashwamedh Yajna. So this is something which was invoked till almost 400 years ago. But of late, especially because of the requirement of the ritual, hmm, which is which requires a lot of knowledge about the mantras, the whole science of performing yajna, and the purity of the brahmana and the candidature of the yajman. With all of that getting lost, these sacrifices have taken a backseat, or rather are now prohibited by the. Is my voice audible clearly? There's a lot of trees coming in. I hope that's not distracting.
It's okay, Prabhu.
So these sacrifices are now prohibited, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport. He says 5 things are prohibited in the Kali Yuga. Ashwamedham, Gavalambam. Ashwamedham is the Ashwamedh sacrifice. Gavalambam is the cow sacrifice. Sannyasam. Sannyasam means adopting the renounced order of life. That is also prohibited. Palapaitrakam. Palapaitrakam means offering of flesh to the forefathers. There are ceremonies in which Shraddha is performed. The forefathers, the Pitra. Pitra means forefathers. And from Pitra, the word Paitra has come. So offering oblations to the forefathers is a Vedic system. But in some of them, in some yajnas, the oblations which are offered are of flesh. So offering those kind of flesh offerings are forbidden. Palapaitra. And then the fifth one is Devarena Sutotpattim. Devar means, every Indian will know, Devar word stands for what? The younger brother, mostly the younger brother of the, the younger brother, just a second. Hare Krishna. Very sorry. a sudden breeze. So Devarena Sutotpattim over here means uh, the husband's brother at times was allowed to beget children in the womb of the brother's wife. So that is prohibited. Kalau Pancha Vivarjayet. These 5 things are prohibited in Kali Yuga. So the whole ideology of a sacrifice is basically to offer something for the pleasure of the Lord. And in different times, different things were positioned. As I generally, we generally read that the Vedic scriptures are flexible to a great degree because they very much understand the time, place, circumstance triangle. According to different ages, different processes are recommended. Like we have heard this particular verse, Krite yad dhyato Vishnum. Krite yad dhyato Vishnum means that in the Satyuga, Krite Yuga is the Satyuga, the process of meditating on the Lord was considered as the primary process. So Krite yad dhyato Vishnu, that was the main process. So you could see the yogis who would be sitting in Padmasan, Vajrasan or different asanas, and they would be with their half closed eyes, they would be meditating on the Lord. So that is the process of Satyuga, Dhyan. It was possible in that particular time, place, circumstance. Triteya Dhyato Vishnu, and then it says Tretayam, Treta, in the Treta Yuga, the second one. Tretayam Yajito Makhai. Makhai means a big fire sacrifice. So in the Treta Yuga, the process changed to conducting big fire sacrifices, whole scale, huge Havan Kunda was made, and there would be a lot of ahutis, swaha, swaha. So that was the process in Treta Yuga. Dwapare Paricharyayam. The third one is Dwapare. In the Dwapar Yuga, Paricharyaya. Paricharyaya means offering service to the deities. Paricharyaya actually means rendering menial services to the deities. So, constructing big temples, rendering service to the deity, deity worship became the predominant process. Dwapare Paricharyayam and Kalau. Kalau means Kali, Kali, this particular Iron Age. Kalau Tad Hari Kirtana. In this Kali, the process is Hari Kirtan. Kirtan, Bhajan Kirtan, Shravan Kirtan, we use these words. So the process gets changed, or the focus process is Hari Kirtan. So when we say this verse, it is not that Dhyan or meditation was only in Satyuga and it is no more applicable in Kali. It is still very much applicable. Instead of meditating on some object, instead of meditating on some impersonal aspect, on some light, on some thoughts of the mind, instead of meditating on the inhaling and the exhalation process, now in Kali Yuga, we meditate, we continue the dhyan, we meditate on the sound, we meditate on the holy name. So in Kali Yuga, the process is meditation. Okay, I may need to switch off my camera for a minute. It says that your device is overheating. So continue without the video. So the process is to meditate on the sound meditation. So Kali Yuga means meditating on the sound. Kalau Tad Hari Kirtan. So the Shastras, the Vedic scriptures are very much considerate. They are very sensitive to the time, place, circumstance, need. And therefore, we see that there are some things which were applicable in previous yugas, in previous time, in the previous eras, like these fire sacrifices, Ashwamedh Yagya, etc. But in Kali Yuga, in this particular age, they are much prohibited, as Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport. So then what is the method in Kali Yuga? In Kali Yuga, the method is Sankirtan Yagya. Srila Prabhupada says, Yagyai Sankirtan Prayar Yajanti Hi Sumeta Saha. So all intelligent men The Sumedha Saha. Medha, Medha refers to intellect, and Sumedha refers to very high intelligence or superfine intellect. So the intelligent people, what do? They follow the Sankirtan Yagya. Sankirtan. Sankirtan means coming together and observing or performing Kirtan. Kirtan word stands for glorifying the Lord. Kirti Gan. When we come together to glorify the Lord, that becomes as Kirtan. And Sankirtan means coming together and glorifying the Lord. So even speaking on the Srimad Bhagavatam is Sankirtan, and in ISKCON lingo, distributing books is also Sankirtan. Going out on the streets and performing Harinam is definitely a Sankirtan. Sitting in the temple hall, couple of devotees gather in a congregation home and perform Kirtan. So all this becomes Sankirtan. Even at times discussing management together becomes Sankirtan. Everything intended to glorify the Lord is Sankirtan. So Yagya is Sankirtan prior Yajanti hi Sumedha. So what is the process in this age? It is Sankirtan Yagya. So the interesting part in this purport is that, or in this translation is that, in the character of Bharat Maharaj is that he would perform various kinds of sacrifices, and these sacrifices were strictly conducted with the Vedic procedures. But the purpose in performing these sacrifices was to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He didn't do it with an ulterior motive of getting some material wealth, expanding his kingdom, getting beautiful wife, children. He did it solely for the purpose of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And why he performed these sacrifices? Because that was the recommended procedure in those ages. And as the eras have changed, we understand that in Kali Yuga, the same thing can be achieved by performing the Sankirtan Yagya. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada mentions this, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is the Sankirtan avatar, who appeared to propagate the Sankirtan movement. So this Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has inaugurated this and propagated Sankirtan movement. So therefore, in this Kali Yuga, these yagyas are more or less restricted because of lack of brahmanas, the ingredients, the purity of the ingredients, the proper knowledge of the procedures, and a lot of other things which are involved, the proper astrological aspects. This Ashwamedh Yagya, for example, involves actually killing a horse, but the horse is rejuvenated with a new body. That is when you understand that the Ashwamedh Yagya is fully complete. If that is not there, if the horse does not stand up with a new body in front of the priest and in front of the sponsorer, then it is understood that there was some error in the performance of the sacrifice. So that whole sacrifice begins with astrological calculations. At which date the horse would be released? A particular horse is chosen. Generally, that horse is of white body with black spots. Traditionally, that is the understanding in Ashwamedh Yagya. And such a horse is released, and it has some 400 soldiers surrounding it. The horse is anointed with different auspicious paraphernalia, and it is left open. It goes in many directions. Anybody who challenges the horse, the horse visits a particular country or a particular kingdom, and anybody who does not welcome the horse or challenges the horse has to have a fight, a war, and then the opponent is defeated, and like that the horse continues its course of journey, which is many times spanning over 6 months to 1 year, and then the horse returns. And during that time, every day there is some ceremony, some procedure going on in the kingdom of the sponsor. So the brahmanas are performing some or the other yagyas, home, havan, etc. And then on the day the horse is supposed to return to the kingdom, the horse returns, and then he is again. There are a lot of procedures. Some books have given very detailed description. Of course, they are not from the Srimad Bhagavatam and related literatures, but from the other Karma Kanda literatures. They have a lot of details of how the horse is sacrificed. He stands in a particular position in a particular direction, and then there is a particular sacrificial altar made for that horse, and then he is sacrificed with chanting of some mantras. But the testimony is that the horse is rejuvenated with a new life, a new body instantly. So, in summary, Bharat Maharaj performed all these activities for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. These were in accordance with the time, place, and circumstances of that particular era. And in today's day and age, we see that Sankirtan Yag, as mentioned by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is the process which we all observe, and that is what can give us the same benefit what Bharat Maharaj received. In fact, even more than that. So these are a few thoughts on this particular verse I thought of sharing today. So thank you all. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to finally share some things. If there are any questions or any other comments or topics for discussion, maybe we can take them now.
Thank you very
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu, for enlightening us on the topic of this various yajnas, the 4 types of yajnas that could be done in different yugas. Such yuga, the prescribed is that meditation, and in the Treta Yuga it was the yajnas, and the Dwapara it was the fire sacrifice, and Kali Yuga it was the Sankirtana immediately. And Bharat Maharaj did all these things as per the prescribed by Vedas and as per the time circumstances. And for us, the main thing is the Sankirtana is the prescribed for us. Thank you so much for enlightening us on this, Prabhu. Thank you for much time. Please, devotees, please go ahead and share your realizations or questions. You can raise your hands.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for speaking on the different kinds of yajna and how and why they are not relevant anymore in our time. I really don't have any questions. Just wanted to thank you for your wonderful class. Hare Krishna.
This episode of Bharat Maharaj, I was mentioning, is a very interesting episode, especially for devotees because of the relevance. Bharat Maharaj's episode can actually teach a lot of lessons to the devotees. Every episode and pastime in the Srimad Bhagavatam is very, very relevant, no doubt about that. But this episode is very close to all practicing devotees, especially. That is the subset which it highlights. All of us who are in the process, who have now committed to Krishna consciousness for this lifetime. Bharat Maharaj is a committed devotee who has agreed to perform his spiritual duties. So somebody like us, of course, we are not comparing ourselves with Bharat Maharaj, but in character. And then this Bharat Maharaj goes and he goes with a noble cause of performing his spiritual duties with even more intensity. That is the reason he has gone to the forest and he has given up practically every other thing. While Bharat Maharaj gave up his kingdom, sometimes our devotees give up their material relationships They turn to Krishna consciousness, and then everyone says, oh, you are crazy, you have accepted this orthodox method. And therefore at times there are arguments, and then we finally have to choose between one, the devotees or the material friends and relatives. So the devotees also give up that. So similar like Bharat Maharaj, devotees also give up. And at times we give up visiting other places of interest which are very attractive to the tourists around the world, but the devotees are interested in going to holy places, spiritual places, rendering services. So a wholesale transformation in lifestyle, like Bharat Maharaj. But then in Bharat Maharaj, after giving up the kingdom, giving up wife, children, giving up all the material activities, duties, responsibilities, what ends up is that where Bharat Maharaj gets attached to a deer. And identifying that deer in our lives is also equally important. We may have left so many things, we may have taken those huge steps in the early days by giving up so many material things. But eventually, somewhere down the line, we get attached to some deer. Of course, that need not be a deer, but it can be some form of deer, hmm, something, a post, position, followership, anything. And that deer can become the cause of our hindrance in spiritual life. Therefore, this Bharat Maharaj's episode, this happened in our temple just recently. We are in our temple Bhagavatam classes, we are ahead by a few chapters. So this episode we have discussed very elaborately in both temples in ISKCON Pune. We are through this episode. So therefore, the relevance of Bharat Maharaj episode is so close. See, if it is Ajamil's pastime, sixth canto, soon in some months maybe we will be touching the sixth canto here also. And Ajamil's pastime, sometimes we say, oh, I am not Ajamil. Ajamil was a prostitute hunter. I am not. So to connect with Ajamil may take some time for us. But Bharat Maharaj case is very close, right? Hmm? So therefore, the relevance of this episode is very, very, very closely connected with the practicing devotees, I feel. So Bharat Maharaj's life was fully focused for spiritual purpose, and like that, many of our devotees also, we are focused, initially at least. Somewhere down the line, it just slips from our consciousness. Then the deer comes in. And when the deer comes in the picture, the whole story takes a turn, U-turn. And then where we are heading to, we just lose track. So from here, we can take this cue of being more alert and attentive in the path of spiritual life. I feel therefore this episode must be remembered and recited more often with more details. It will really help the devotees. That's all I can say. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I just wanted to thank you for such a wonderful class. I really appreciate all of the discussion about the yagyas because it actually made me feel grateful to have, Sankirtan as the yagya for all of us in this age. Because we are not qualified to do any of the other yagyas to the level that they should be done at. So I'm actually very grateful. I also appreciate what you just said about Bharat Maharaj's pastime and how, we can relate to that because it also reminded me to be steadfast in my devotion. And it's a good lesson, a good warning that not to get complacent and not to think that, okay, I'm doing my sadhana and I'm a devotee and I have to, be careful and be aware of deers in life coming through and distracting. So I'm glad to have this pastime told again in such a way this early in my devotional life because it's something that I can kind of keep in my mind for the future. So Hare Krishna, thank you again for such a lovely class, Prabhuji. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay.
So,
Can we end?
if nobody, no other has any other questions, we can end this call. We can. Prabhu, Krishna, thank you so much for your time and association, Prabhu. Please pay this valuable association again frequently in our call. Thank you so much, Prabhu. If nobody has any questions, we can end this call and please pay our obeisances to Prabhuji. Vancha kalpataru pattanam pavanebhyo namo namaha.
वैष्णववृंद की जय।
अनंतकोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। श्री रविंद्र चैतन्य दास प्रभु जी की जय। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण प्रभु जी